real life scenario today. We are going over an HTMA hair tissue mineral analysis results for a consulting client of mine who I've done other hormone and metabolic work prior in the years past. We decided to take a deeper dive and look at her internal mineral balance, heavy metal toxicity to see, where is she dropping short of? What is she not getting in nutrient-wise to her system? What could be the culprit of some of the symptoms that she's having? And so we look at this first page here. We are looking at the nutritional elements. This is the main table for the main minerals that we have. We have the toxic elements table. This is where we're looking at the heavy metal status. And then we have some additional elements down here, and anything out of range and high in a lot of these areas is going to cause a negative effect. And on the second page here, we are looking at some significant ratios. This is where we are looking at some balance between two of them. And this one is a whole different comparison in toxic ratios. So any imbalances in ratios that are too high or too low are going to cause some issues in different directions. So it's just interesting to start comparing things. And as you dive deeper and start to understand the mineral relationships, co-relationships, you start to really put some things together. Our mineral balance drives the glands of our body. That includes our pituitary gland, our thyroid, our thymus gland, our adrenals. And we start to see people's symptoms completely relate to a lot of the imbalances and symptoms that they're experiencing. And even from a hormonal standpoint, the minerals do drive the production of a lot of these things. And so with this specific client, it was great to have had several lab reports done with her prior. I already knew a lot of her symptoms. I already knew a lot of her health history. This client specifically is on birth control, although it's not my preference for people to be on that. We can see how the hormonal imbalances that she has from the birth control are contributing to overall mineral imbalance. And when we drive to balance the body with the minerals and heavy metals, a huge component of that is knowing that if she's going to be on hormones, synthetic hormones that will continue to suppress pituitary function and suppress some of these things, that these things will probably be stuff that she's going to have to manage a little bit harder long term. It's harder to put the body back into balance and get it functioning on its own when you're forcing it not to do that by suppressing the pituitary. Being on birth control, whole nother story. However, when we look at this mineral balance chart, we start looking at the nutritional elements first. The first four are the most important. They are what drive the cells to perform correctly and to carry out those functions. When those four first elements aren't balanced first, none of these other ones can balance. And so that's the first point I want to make. This client's symptoms are very tired often, hypoglycemia issues, constipation issues. There are just feelings of being tired, never feeling hydrated, a lot of just different things going on. So we look at this test here, we can see sodium and potassium are both very low, and sodium and potassium have a lot to do with hydrochloric acid production, so stomach acid production. This is how we break down our proteins, this is how we break down our food, it's how we kill off pathogens in our body so they can't enter into our digestive tract, and it gives us that energy. And we have the calcium and magnesium. Calcium and magnesium are calming minerals. They are what keep our system in a parasympathetic state. We have our sympathetic nervous system that's activated, and we have the sympathetic side. So somebody like this is considered parasympathetic because her calming hormones are dominant over her activation minerals. And so this client does match up with those characteristics. She tends to be really tired, doesn't have an appetite in the morning, isn't very hungry, poor absorption, poor digestion, often has low blood sugar issues. Those calcium and magnesium levels are creating this dominance of parasympathetic state where her system isn't getting that cortisol production, and we need to have some cortisol and stress hormones to keep our system alive. We need cortisol in the morning to wake us up and to give us that energy. And because of the sodium and potassium being extremely low, often we can start to see how and why she's not getting that cortisol production, but it starts to carry over into other issues. And at the point where you don't have enough sodium and potassium to keep you hydrated, you're not producing enough stomach acid production, you're not breaking your food down properly, it only then further leads to excess depletion in minerals and nutrients. She's going to be, and she is, low in a lot of these minerals across the board. She's probably not digesting, absorbing them very well. And that sodium and potassium is exactly why. As I said, when these first four are imbalanced, it tends to throw all the others off. And this is one of these is, the big reason why. And even though calcium and magnesium here don't look too far off, when we look at the numbers, they are very imbalanced. And there are obviously different readings, not something that you guys need to understand at this point. But calcium is completely dominant in these first four. Calcium can lead to kidney issues. It can lead to gallstones. Low magnesium, low potassium lead to issues in the thyroid gland. So you tend to be a slower metabolic type, slow metabolism, slow digestion. This client does have constipation problems, issues with absorption, and when you have a lot of those things going on, you can just see how it starts to carry out in all these other issues, other hormone imbalances, with not going to the bathroom, not absorbing more of your nutrients, not feeling hungry, not having the energy. And you can't force your body to lose weight when it can't even carry these functions correctly. You can't even absorb nutrients. Your thyroid's not converting the active form of T4 into the inactive form of T4 into the active form of T3 that regulates metabolism, that regulates a lot of the digestion of the gut. So a lot of people with a setup like this tend to have a lot of gut dysbiosis, like H. pylori or bacterial overgrowth. They may have some food sensitivities and allergies because a lot of that food has entered into the gut lining, can't be broken down correctly, and so on and so forth. A lot of these things carry over significantly. So we're looking at the toxic elements here. We're seeing that mercury is flagged up here pretty high. We're not in that high range yet, which would be totally awful, but even just this amount here of the mercury is a pretty good amount. And one of the interesting things, we'll flip down here to the second page in the significant ratios and the toxic ratios, is any interaction that has to do with mercury. Mercury will fight for absorption with selenium, iron, zinc. Selenium, iron, and zinc. As well as sulfur. And so a low toxic ratio means that this is causing the other to protect it. So one of the interesting things is that with mercury, the body will accumulate excess of specific minerals in order to try to create a shell around it. And you can see that, in this case, okay, good. We need more zinc. The zinc is in a good range. The selenium is in a good range. The sulfur is in a good range, but those levels are driving up, causing an imbalance between the ratio of others. And the mercury is causing the retention of these three in order to try to protect the mercury from invading the system and to take over. And so it's not that, the level of those minerals like the iron and the selenium and the zinc aren't in a good range, but when we compare them to the mercury, it's in an unacceptable place for that reason. And those are the only ones that are off here. And that all has to do with the mercury. And so it's causing issues within the absorption of the other minerals, which is why we have to detox and chelate the mercury out so it stops forcing a lot of the imbalance of some of these. Because even if we start getting some of the other mineral levels up, it's going to make it harder to manage and balance out over time. That mercury's got to get out of the tissue. It causes a lot of oxidative stress. It can cause a lot of other absorption issues in the body, and it's toxic. So we got to get it out, and that will help improve some of the other mineral profile as well. When we're looking at these significant ratios here, we're looking at what is too high. Now, these are the ones that are competing for each other. These are the antagonistic relationships. So if we look at calcium and phosphorus, if we're looking at calcium and potassium, we're looking at zinc and copper, we're looking at calcium and magnesium, a ratio that's too high is meaning that they don't have a good balance, and one of them is too high and one of them is too low. Those two need to be in an acceptable range, meaning they're more balanced. And what's interesting here is that sodium and potassium up here are both very low, although they are in a closer balance. So if you look at it down here, the calcium and potassium look like they're in an acceptable balance, which they are. However, they're still too low overall. So you need to just understand how all of this stuff works in order to bring people into balance. And I'm not explaining this to you guys because I want you to learn how to balance minerals. I'm just explaining to you how easy it is for us to get mineral imbalances because of a lot of these things that are going on. And as I said, she does have a lot of issues with low adrenals, meaning not making enough cortisol, having slow metabolism. She's never getting that energy, never getting that boost. It's causing slow digestion. It's causing constipation. It's causing a lot of gut dysbiosis. We haven't even done a GI test with her yet to see what has been causing in her gut, what bacteria are overgrown, and what other issues are going on there. We have simply started with this. And with this specific client, our goal is to bring up the low minerals, and so they're in the right ratios overall, in the right balance. And I explain these as sort of being like kind of like a spider web, where you add in one mineral and it will have a trickle. It will spring out things on a different side, almost like a trampoline. And so you have to understand these mineral relationships when you are working at balancing with somebody, because if we just, calcium and magnesium are in balance, magnesium is a little low. Well, if I just throw in a bunch of magnesium with this client, then suddenly all of her calcium is going to drop too low. And if I don't put the right amount of the sodium and potassium in at the same time, then I'm further driving some of those other toxic ratios that we talked about that need to be up. Potassium plays a huge role in the absorption of magnesium, and I need to understand how much potassium do we add in at the same time as we're also additionally adding in more magnesium, knowing how much it's actually going to quickly jump up, and doing that knowing what the counter will be with the calcium at that same time. So we don't completely eliminate calcium out. We want to keep that up a little bit, so we may add in a little bit of that. So it's really about understanding the amounts and the dosing and which minerals affect other minerals. When we add in certain protocols, how does that affect, the down trickle effect? And it's not a lot different than how hormones work. It's a feedback loop. So you do one thing and it can have an effect on everything else. And we don't always know exactly how somebody will respond because everyone's body is a little more sensitive. We have different pathways. The inflammation of the cell plays a huge role. How much of what we're putting in our bodies are we actually absorbing, especially when if somebody has absorption issues. That plays a huge role in how these additional supplements are going to start to increase, decrease, affect other things. And so not only do we look at the mineral protocols that we go in which doing this, because sometimes it's just food, sometimes it's certain supplementation, but we also look at what symptoms do they have digestively, and we address that as well as lifestyle protocols and different things that can be done with a client like this who's not eating enough food. We have to up the intake as well. We have to make lifestyle modifications. If stress is an issue contributing to some of these problems, then we address the minerals, the lifestyle, the diet together as well. And because this client has also done comprehensive blood work and hormone analysis, I already know where a lot of the hormone profiles are, and I already understand how we can put all of those pieces together to even further progress her goals and progress her healing as well. And with this client, with the birth control and, some of those other outside things, there are certain things that we won't be able to move specifically because of that. But this gives us a really huge piece of the puzzle and some of the symptoms and long time effects of some of the issues she's going on. This client also had an issue with iron absorption in the past and having low iron frequently, and we need cofactor minerals in order to absorb iron. Certain things that fight for iron absorption, the mercury in her system could have a huge impact on her ability to absorb iron, as that is one of those things that can overload in the cell to protect, but not having enough copper in order to absorb the iron is huge, and some of those other mineral cofactors. So hope you guys got some really good insight on how in-depth this stuff is. You might look at one of these things and it looks super basic, but there's so much more that goes into the symptoms, the analysis, the diving deep and understanding how things are related to symptoms, and really how to get someone out on the other side of it and to balance those things overall.